So there has been some talk in the Star Wars community of the sequel trilogy being erased from the current Disney canon with some time travel shenanigans that was introduced in Star Wars Rebels. These quote-unquote rumors were revealed by the YouTuber Doomcock, who supposedly has connections inside Lucasfilm, giving him this information. Now, anything related to the new canon, I don't normally cover. They can pretty much do anything they want with it. And as far as the new canon goes, the most I tell people is to just not financially support it in favor of Legends. And my reasoning for that is that the new canon isn't in any danger of going away. But Legends is, and if we want to see more stories made in that continuity, then that's the Star Wars content we should be supporting. But this new story pertains to the new canon possibly going away, or at least a huge part of it. In that sense, theoretically, sequel trilogy fans could be in the same boat as us EU fans. Furthermore, this actually does tie into news about Legends, but we'll get into that a little later. A lot of people have already covered this already, but I kind of wanted to give my take on all this. First of all, I don't believe these rumors are true in the slightest, for many reasons. EckhartsLadder covers some in his video, for which I'll leave a link in the description. Chief among the reasons, why would Disney put so much time, money, and effort into creating a brand new series of movies just to decanonize them 5 years later? Like it or not, the sequel trilogy is a core element of the new Disney canon. Its existence, after all, is why the original continuity, the expanded universe, was made non-canon and Disney went in a different direction. It wouldn't make any sense to make the sequel trilogy, along with several books and comics that tie into it, non-canon, while keeping everything else? I don't buy it. Another factor is the normies. You're going to try to explain that episodes 7 through 9 didn't happen because of time travel? People said incorporating the EU into episode 7 would confuse moviegoers, but this is something else entirely. The closest mainstream movie that I can think of that did something similar was X-Men Days of Future Past. But that's all superheroes and comic books. I didn't think Disney Star Wars would scrape the bottom of the barrel that quickly. And another reason I don't think this would happen is, frankly, the ego of Disney and Lucasfilm. After all the backlash of sequel trilogy critics being called man-babies and Russian bots by Lucasfilm employees, do we really expect them to turn around and delete the sequels from Disney canon? I think that would basically be them admitting the sequels were a mistake, which they would never do. I think EckhartsLadder put it best. These are things the sequel trilogy haters want to hear. They like the idea of Lucasfilm reneging on the sequels, but I don't think Lucasfilm wants to do that. I get that there's supposed to be warring factions within the company, but I would be shocked if erasing the sequels would even be considered by anyone. By the way, it would be a terrible idea. I don't follow the new canon, I don't care about the new canon, but a move like this would confirm to me that the new canon is the trash fire that people say it is. If they go through with this, everyone who said they don't have any plan in mind for Star Wars would be proven right. I mean, people who hate the sequels would be happy, but the sequels, believe it or not, have fans who love them. And you're going to tell me Lucasfilm is going to turn on them, their loyalist of supporters? And really, they shouldn't. I know what it's like to have your continuity decanonized and discontinued. It sucks. And I don't want it to happen to fans of Disney canon either. Even if some of them hate the EU and were glad to see it go, I don't want the same thing to happen to them. And to the sequel haters, if you really don't want a continuity with the sequel trilogy in it, the answer is simple. It's always been there, and I'll keep saying it till the end of time. Follow the EU instead. Trying to cling on to these rumors that maybe the sequels will be written out of the Disney canon, or signing a petition to remove Last Jedi from Disney canon, is a little pathetic. I hate to say, I get that you're frustrated with Star Wars and the current management right now. Oh, we EU fans understand better than anyone. But at least we're happy with our Star Wars. We're campaigning for more of our continuity, not trying to remove parts of a continuity that we can barely stand. Are we facing a difficult task? Of course we are, but at least it's in the realm of possibility. The release of Star Wars Issue 108 last year showed us that Disney, Lucasfilm, Del Rey, or Marvel can make new Star Wars Legends at any time if they wanted to. and we beseech them to make more Legends as loyal, die-hard Star Wars fans. We understand that they have a new canon they're working on, and that's great too. We just want a bone thrown in our direction every once in a while. But it can happen, and it has happened already. You hate the sequels? You don't like the new canon? The EU is still there for you. I guarantee that you'll love it. But anyway, let's take a look at Doomcock's video, and see for ourselves if there's any validity to these rumors, and if they would be a good idea for Star Wars.
Greetings, my friends. Last week I broke news about the secret plan to save Star Wars. In that video I explained that factions within Lucasfilm were already moving to nullify the Disney sequel trilogy using a concept introduced into canon by Star Wars Rebels. In the Season 4, Episode 13 installment titled A World Between Worlds, the concept of the Veil of the Force was introduced, a mystical dimension of the Force that connects all time and space.
The Veil of the Force sounds like something that if it was introduced in the expanded universe, EU haters would bash it like crazy, but since it's made by Filoni, it gets a pass for some reason.
Well, since I completed that video, I have received additional confirmation from 2 additional sources claiming that this is spot on, that indeed Lucasfilm realizes they have a massive problem on their hands, that the Star Wars franchise is all but dead, and despite Kathleen Kennedy's hatred of this idea, Lucasfilm is preparing to render the sequel trilogy null and void.
I don't blame Kathleen for this one. I hate this idea too. Again, we're going to rely on time travel to retcon the sequels out of existence? Is that the best they can come up with? I agree with Doomcock that the public kind of views Star Wars as a dead franchise now, because Disney did such a horrible job with it. But this is not the answer. Even the new canon is starting to move away from the sequel era, which isn't a complete fix on the problem, but distracting people with a different era like the High Republic is probably all they really can do to get people to not focus on the terrible sequel movies.
The events of The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and The Rise of Skywalker will be removed from canon, isolated in their own alternate timeline, and regarded as Elseworld-like installments under the label of Star Wars Legends.
No, absolutely not. This part of the video is the reason why I felt I had to respond. You new canon fans aren't dumping your shitty movies in our continuity. You wanted to get rid of the EU and use creative freedom for your new canon, and you got it. The Legends continuity is a whole separate timeline from Disney canon. You can't just arbitrarily plop the events of a trilogy somewhere in the middle of the EU timeline and expect it to all make sense. It's not a dumping ground for Disney's bullshit. It's the original canon of Star Wars, outside the movies, often overseen by George Lucas himself. Our canon is free of the sequel trilogy. Yours isn't. That's something you just have to deal with. Instead of trying to come up with ways to nullify the sequels, the simplest answer is, like I said earlier, just follow the Legends timeline. You'll be happier for it. I promise.
But after that video debuted, many fans were asking me exactly how do they propose to use the Veil of the Force to accomplish this. Well, my friends, my sources have beat the bushes, and I can now reveal more specific details about the alleged secret plan to save Star Wars. However, as is always the case, this information comes to me from sources inside Disney or Lucasfilm, and given that I cannot independently verify this information, I must ask you to regard it as unverified rumor and take it with a grain of salt. That said, please watch this video to the end, as I have some proof from Rise of Skywalker to support what my sources are telling me, and you won't want to miss this. It is important to note that this is not a fait accompli, as Kathleen Kennedy hates this idea with a passion and is reportedly doing everything she can to crush it, which is quite understandable given that, if this comes to pass, everything that Kathleen Kennedy did with the sequel trilogy will be destroyed, tossed out, and declared obsolete.
Then that's another thing working against this rumor. If the head of Lucasfilm hates this idea with a passion, then even if it did come up in a board meeting or something, it wouldn't take a lot of discussion before it gets thrown in the trash. Lucasfilm, and especially Lucasfilm under Disney, doesn't strike me as a company whose employees are working against their leader. You would be hard-pressed to find so much as a single tweet from a Lucasfilm employee that voices even a tiny criticism of the Star Wars sequels. If you've noticed, people that have differing viewpoints from Kathleen on how Star Wars ought to be run don't stick around for very long.
She is reportedly fighting against these bits of apostasy, but from what information I've been given, my feeling is these ideas will prevail in the end. A massive reset is going to hit the Star Wars universe, and this, I am told, is how they plan to undo the Disney sequels.
As a fan living through a canon reset, I could see one happening again, especially with how fast the current canon is being created compared to the decades it took to build up the EU. But I still think it's far too soon. I think Disney and Lucasfilm's ego is too big to reboot now. And again, I don't think they should. Now that Disney introduced the concept of rebooting the canon back in 2014, the floodgates have opened. And maybe Disney will reboot again 10 years from now when they run out of ideas. And even then, they might keep the sequels around. I don't know. I don't think it'll happen for some time, so there's not very much point in speculating right now.
It will be explained that Emperor Palpatine had a room on the second Death Star called the Room of Mirrors. The mirrors were created by the Emperor prior to the Death Star through the dark side using ancient Sith rituals. These mirrors, linked to the Veil of the Force, served many purposes. Using them, Palpatine could manipulate the Force in many ways to further his aims. For example, the use of the mirrors allowed Palpatine to cloud the Jedi Council, to conceal himself and his dark apprentices from the Jedi and from Force sensitives that followed their fall. Using the mirrors allowed Palpatine to access the awesome powers of the Veil of the Force. They were indispensable tools that allowed him to rise to the pinnacle of ultimate power. It is this conceit that explains how Palpatine survived Darth Vader throwing him down the shaft in the throne room of the Death Star. In desperation as he fell, Palpatine opened a portal to the Veil of the Force and entered it. This explains why Palpatine is in such a damaged state in The Rise of Skywalker, as transporting himself into the Veil without the aid of the mirrors drained him and damaged him severely. Now, fortunately for the erstwhile Emperor, Palpatine had another room of mirrors installed on Exegol. Palpatine was able to leave the Veil of the Force using the mirrors on Exegol to transport himself there, to begin scheming the rise of the new Empire and his return to glory, albeit in his grievously damaged state.
Well, it's a very interesting, if overcomplicated, fan theory, but even with my limited knowledge of the new canon, I know it doesn't work, because Palpatine is in a clone body in Rise of Skywalker. And to be honest, as a fan of Dark Empire, that explanation makes more sense to me than Palpatine going through a secret portal in a mirror to another dimension, and then out of a mirror on a different planet.
Which begs the question, how will this backstory be used to erase the sequel trilogy and undo the nefarious schemes of Kathleen Kennedy? The solution is diabolically simple, my friends. Remember that the Veil of the Force is a mystical dimension wherein all times collide. So all someone has to do to erase all of this timeline and consign it to its own alternate timeline forever is to go into the Veil and wait for Palpatine to enter. Palpatine goes into the Veil and never gets back to Exegol. He is prevented from using the mirrors to return. He dies as he was intended to, and Bob's your uncle. All our problems are solved. That's right, my friends. The solution is essentially Disney hitting Harvey Cthulhu's button and destroying the Kennedyverse. Palpatine does not survive the Death Star after all. He is either prevented from opening the portal from inside the Veil, or he is prevented from returning to Exegol once he enters the Veil, helpless, drained, and dying, and voila! No Disney sequel trilogy, Han doesn't walk stupidly into a lightsaber, Leia doesn't fly like Mary Poppins through space, Luke has nothing to run away from and consumes no green milk, and I am informed there will be no amazing Wonder Ray, as she was born after the Emperor's death. This last bit about Rey is something that remains unclear to me, given that Palpatine is supposedly her grandfather, and so whoever gave birth to Rey is presumably still out there after his death, but the source providing this information reportedly indicated that this is the plan, to retcon the sequel trilogy out of our misery and restore freedom to George Lucas's galaxy.
I could see this all happening if Disney ran out of money one day and had to sell Star Wars to someone who despised the sequel trilogy. But other than that, I am highly skeptical. Okay, the sequels are retconned out of existence, or forced into the Legends timeline, if you want to view it that way. What do we replace it with? None of the old actors are going to return, and all of the new actors seem to want nothing to do with Star Wars anymore either. Not that I blame them all that much. Still, considering how much build-up Lucasfilm has done with Rey, I'm really supposed to believe they'll wipe away her character forever? For better or for worse, she's kind of been the face of the new Disney Star Wars franchise. Don't get me wrong, I don't care about Rey at all. I never have. But Lucasfilm does. And yes, a lot of fans do too. I hate to say it, but this current incarnation of Lucasfilm cares more about Rey fans than EU fans or sequel trilogy haters.
Now, is there any proof of any of this? The proof may well be hidden within The Rise of Skywalker itself, although I'm not convinced Jar Jar Abrams understood the significance of this scene even as he filmed it. It is unclear if what I'm about to mention was planted in Rise of Skywalker in preparation of destroying the sequel trilogy, or if it is being retconned to facilitate rebooting the Star Wars universe. But regardless, I think this scene amply demonstrates the plausibility of this rumor. So in The Rise of Skywalker, when Rey goes into the ruins of the Death Star seeking the Sith holocron and, more importantly, some semblance of coherence in the plot, she discovers a secret room just off the throne room where Luke famously declared himself a Jedi like his father before him. Rey goes into the hidden room, and as you can see here, it is covered with broken mirrors. Shortly after Rey retrieves the Sith holocron, she catches a glimpse of movement in one of the intact mirrors. She turns and confronts an alternate version of herself, a dark Rey with a Swiss Army lightsaber. This evil twin actually emerges from the mirror and engages Rey in battle. Well, my friends, this is your glimpse into the veil of the Force. Literally anything is possible here as branching alternate realities converge and diverge in that mystical dimension. What is glimpsed in those mirrors is an alternate version of Rey, and lurking within the veil are alternate versions of Palpatine, alternate versions of Luke, alternate versions of Han. Somewhere in that vast multiverse may even lie a version of the Disney sequels that didn't suck, that didn't outrage and alienate a huge section of the Star Wars fandom. But for now, the best we can hope for is using the veil of the Force to obliterate the Disney sequels, banishing them to their own little funhouse mirror in the vast Hall of Mirrors multiverse, to be forgotten as the substandard garbage they are.
I've never seen Rise of Skywalker, so I could be way off here, but the scene Doomcock is describing seems to be a callback to the Empire Strikes Back scene, where Luke has a vision of fighting himself wearing the Darth Vader outfit. We know J.J. Abrams isn't the most original director out there, and I think J.J. doing yet another callback to the OT is a more likely scenario than Rey fighting an evil version of herself from another dimension or whatever.
Many have said in response to my video that this is too little, too late. I certainly respect that view. After all, we did miss out on the one chance we had to see Han, Luke, and Leia reunited on screen together for one final adventure in that galaxy far, far away. Nothing can ever repair that. Nothing can ever make that right with fans who were cheated of this one chance to see the band put back together. Similarly, we can never unsee the hideous spectacle of Luke turning into a twisted monster as he attempts to murder his own nephew. Can never unsee Luke sucking on a space manatee. Never unsee Yoda destroying the Jedi Temple. Never unsee Rey being the bestest ever. We can never unfeel the pain of being insulted and labeled as ists and phobes by the very people we have supported for decades. All these things are absolutely true, and as a supervillain, I support your rage. I feel the fury of these insults and injustices myself, and keenly.
And I'll keep repeating that there is a way for Luke, Han, and Leia to be reunited. There is a way that all the stuff you hate about the sequels will never happen. It's in the expanded universe, and it's available in stores right now. If you don't want the sequels to exist in the Star Wars timeline, then pick an alternative timeline. You can do it right this second. Rather than crossing your fingers and hoping Disney undoes all the things you dislike with overly complicated time travel. I've heard so many stories of people who had hope, but were ultimately let down by the sequel trilogy, who then went on and discovered the expanded universe, and never looked back. I recommend the EU to everyone who has been disappointed by Disney Star Wars. And to sequel fans, I recommend the EU to you too, because we should be advocating for more Star Wars stories for all fans, and not the removal or decanonization of any of it.
But if there is to be any hope for Star Wars moving forward, if there is any future at all for this galaxy far, far away, the decanonization and demolition of the unbearably horrible sequel trilogy is a necessary first step. There can be no peace so long as the sequel trilogy lives. If this rumor is true, if they do find a way to declare the sequel trilogy null and void, then this is nothing less than a major concession to fans, an admission that Lucasfilm made a terrible mistake, and a stunning rebuke to Kathleen Kennedy, to her agenda, and her betrayal of George Lucas. If they delete the sequel trilogy from canon, it is nothing less than an act of surrender by Lucasfilm and Disney.
Again, I don't think Lucasfilm or Disney will admit wrongdoing, or admit any sort of surrender. I wish they would sometimes. I want them to admit that discontinuing the EU was wrong, but it doesn't seem to be in their character. With respect, I disagree with Doomcock's statement about there can only be hope in decanonization. Take it from me, the only thing that comes out of decanonization is pissed off fans, and rightfully so. As far as Star Wars goes, hope isn't found in decanonization. It's in continuation, for both fans of Legends and canon. And yes, that does include the sequels.